people say, whoa, you're 70 years old. I mean, how are you supposed to think when you're 70? What are you supposed to feel like?
Yeah.
You know, are you supposed to be like drooling, you know, sitting on the edge of the bed staring at the floor? I mean, what are you supposed to be doing?
Yeah.
You know, I'm motivated to live, and I enjoy my life. I enjoy my friends. I really enjoy what I do. Mm-hmm. I feel blessed. You know, even before the accident, I was blessed to be able to do this for as long as we've been doing it. Mm-hmm. And it's still at a level that is pretty amazing.
Welcome to The Third Story. I'm Leo Sidran. You are a live person, and that was drummer David Garibaldi on the motivation to live and feel good. David Garibaldi is one of the funkiest, most influential drummers of his generation. Those who know. They know about his incredible feel, technique, his books and instructional videos, his interest in Afro-Caribbean music, and those iconic beats with Tower of Power, the group he joined for the first time nearly 50 years ago. And those who have had the pleasure to meet him all talk about his positivity, his generosity, his curiosity, and his energy. The moment you meet him, it's clear that he's a cultivated person in the sense that he's precise, he's orderly, he's focused, almost military in his presentation, but he's also what musicians might call a good hang. He loves to swap stories, talk about his experience, and to laugh. In fact, in our conversation, he expressed as much interest in asking questions as he did in answering them. Those who know also know that earlier this year, while walking to a gig on his home turf at Yoshi's in Oakland, California, David and another musician named Marc van Wageningen were actually hit by a local train. It was slow-moving, but no matter how you look at it, the two of them were hit by a train, and both men survived it. What does that mean? As David himself tells it, he's in a category of two. There's almost no medical precedent for anyone to have been hit by a train and survive. I flew to California last week. I borrowed a car. I drove out to Livermore in the East Bay, listening to Tower of Power the whole way. The Oakland Stroke. What is hip? Soul vaccination. And then I pulled up in front of the house and I rang the doorbell. I have to say I was struck by the fact that despite his long career, the fact that he's 70 years old, though he doesn't really seem it, and that he's still recovering from a very taxing physical experience, he was not particularly eager to explore what his legacy might be. He's still very focused on the present and the future. He told me, the book is still being written. We are in his house. I walk in. He makes coffee. We start talking right away. Fortunately, I turned on my recorder immediately because we were in it and talking about the Bay Area and how growing up in the East Bay informed him. Within the first 2 minutes, he mentioned his contemporary and his long friend, the drummer Mike Clark. We're standing in the kitchen. The water is heating. The stories begin. Welcome to my conversation with David Garibaldi.
And then took it there.
Yeah, I mean, this is like a, kind of like a hotbed for all kinds of creative stuff. I mean, the kind of, you go elsewhere and you kind of find, instrumental virtuosity, but I think out here what you get is the more creative virtuosity. So super creative people live here, and it's always been like that. Really amazing,
Well, it sounds like we just started, man.
Oh, we're into it already.
We're in. I don't know anything about this scene here, really, other than what you sort of pieced together. But one thing I do feel is that it's its own self-contained bubble out
That's
here.
That's correct.
There's less looking outside of this scene for too much inspiration or too much information, that there's enough here that people are getting.
No, well, I mean, it's always been a place where cultures and music mixed.
Yeah.
So when I was learning how to play, my impulse and all the guys around me was to mix all the things that we were hearing. Nobody wanted to be a rock and roll musician. Everybody wanted to be a musician that kind of was the sponge of whatever was happening here, which was, of course, rock and roll and funk and Latin music and great jazz scene and, all this classical music even, all these different things.
Yeah.
Kind of made up what was going on here,
I think when it comes to you in particular, it's a mystery what you were into before people heard you record with Tower. At least for me, it was like, what were you playing like, and what were you listening to?
I just described it.
All of that.
Yeah. Mike was, Clark, same way.
Yeah.
Gaylord Birch, Harvey Hughes, all these cats around here that were just deep off into whatever they were into, you know. But it was always a mix of stuff, you know, and everybody getting together. And yeah,
were you hanging with other cats? Were you hanging with Mike? Were you hanging with those guys?
That's when Mike was one of the first guys I met after I got out of the military. So we were subbing in a band called the Reality Sandwich in Oakland, and that's where we met. And Mike was already like a lead dog kind of a dude because he could play jazz and he could do a lot of things that other cats couldn't do.
Yeah.
You know, and he already had nice technique and all that stuff, you know.
And were you playing in the military?
I was a military band, Air Force band.
What did that do to your playing or for your playing?
A lot of stuff. I mean, it was what my music life was. It was a lot of everything. You know, we had great symphonic band. We had great marching band. We had small groups. The symphonic band was the best thing. Mm-hmm. That was really fun. We played real contemporary works. The conductors were real cool. Even though it was the military, they had, you know, sophisticated sort of thinking. So it was more than just military music. We did all of that, mm-hmm. right, which was fun and interesting. And
yeah.
We did all the Sousa stuff and all that, you know.
Yeah.
But then there was real contemporary symphonic music, wind ensemble music that we were doing. That was really great. And the conductors were really cool in the way that they would teach everyone to play the music. So there was a lot of sight reading. We sight read every day, mm-hmm. you know, several pieces of music at every rehearsal, mm-hmm. you know, so there was, you were growing, you know, it was cool.
And you were playing orchestral percussion, playing drum set?
Yeah, I was playing orchestral percussion. It was doing timpani and all the mallet stuff and, you know, snare drum, classical snare drum and all that, you know, which there was really my opportunity to kind of learn that on a higher level because there were some pretty good guys. The section leader there, he eventually went to the Air Force Band in Washington, D.C., fabulous timpani player, but could play jazz and everything, you know, but his classical thing was really slick.
Were you playing a lot of drum set on the side before you went into that? Were you a drum set player?
I was, but I wasn't very good. I wasn't very good at all, you know.
Do you want to sit somewhere? You want to?
We can go down in that room down at the end.
Let's do that.
That's a real comfortable place we can sit. And
that'd be great.
I didn't know Ben Sigurd was your dad. This is so awesome.
Oh, cool. I'm glad that it's a happy surprise. Oh, so you made me coffee and you're drinking takeout coffee.
I came from the gym, and so I stopped by, you know, real quick and got a coffee.
You've always been in such fighting shape, it seems to me. I hear that you're a runner.
Yeah.
And that you're...
cycling and all that stuff. But, you know, I had an accident in January, which was pretty fucked up. So it kind of slowed me down. But yeah, that's why I'm not on the road right now. But you know.
You look great. I mean, there's no...
Oh, I'm getting there. I was a mess.
And what have you been doing to build yourself back up?
Pretty much nothing. Just rehabilitation on God's timetable.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
And can you play?
Oh, yeah. Practice. I'll show you my studio out in the garage.
Yeah.
So I play every day, practice, but not good enough physically to be on the road yet. You know? Mm-hmm. I think November. I still have to have a couple surgeries on my eye. It got pretty jacked up in the accident.
Before I came out here, I mentioned to a few drummer friends that I was going to talk to you, and the love, the just sheer emotion of everybody I say it to is so palpable and so strong.
People have been really super, man. I've gotten a lot of really... I mean, I hear from guys all the time, you know. Yes, I got a real nice message from Antonio Sanchez yesterday. Mm-hmm. You know, just all my friends, man. You know, everybody's very kind and, you know, it's just been really nice, you know. I mean, you hate it to be under those kind of circumstances, but still people's humanity rises to the surface when it has to, you know.
You know, you're so influential to so many people, but maybe it's you don't even feel it until something like that happens.
Yeah, you know, I mean, for me, man, you know, like the story's still being written. I mean, kind of my impact on things, you know, that's for others to decide. You know, I'm still involved in stuff. I mean, I'm just like a kind of a brief interruption, you know. But so now you tour by yourself or with a band? I saw like YouTube clips of you with guys and you in Europe and other stuff. And
I have made a series of records where I play everything. I'm more of a studio rat, and I've always just kind of developed in the same direction or at the same pace on multiple instruments. So I'm a functional drummer and a functional bass player, and enough to get my own ideas across. But what
I hate you.
But I don't have, my live thing has never been as strong as my studio conception. So I do play drums in my dad's band. That's always been my drum gig, basically.
Did he teach you how to play?
He taught me in the sense that
Gave you an opportunity.
gave me an opportunity and showed me what was important, at least to him.
And then he showed you the Steve Gadd thing and said, I want you to play. This is what I like.
That was the hardest thing to get over for me, was playing these tunes that on the, Gadd is playing on the record, or Peter Erskine, or Tony Williams, or, my dad made a series of records.
Your dad, man, he just really screwed everything up for you. That's great, man.
But you know what he ultimately said, and this is what I found, is, you have to find your way to play this stuff. Sure. So I've developed a way to play with him that is, the way I play it.
That's cool.
Yeah, it's cool. Yeah, thanks for
asking. That's fantastic, man.
So you came out of the Army not playing that well.
Air Force.
Out of the Air Force band.
Yeah. And I kind of I would say that my last year in the Air Force, all of a sudden something happened to me musically. And I started playing with a lot of guys. I was stationed up in Washington, in Tacoma, Washington, at McChord Air Force Base, and I got involved with some local guys.
Yeah.
Funk bands and stuff, local bands. And they liked me. So I started playing with them. So I had off the base activities that were really helping me in ways I didn't really realize at the time, So I got out of the military on December 9th, 1969. So it's like right after the Altamont concert up here, right?
And you had been kind of checked out from the whole Bay Area scene at that
time. Yeah, come home on leave and, that kind of stuff, But my thing was, at that time, you had to be in the military. That was mandatory. So I was doing my thing. 3.5 years I was in. Got out, came back home, and immediately got started, started going out and sitting in and meeting people and putting myself out there. And I met Mike, and that's how I met the Tower guys, because Tower had, they were like these young dudes that had won a Battle of the Bands at the Fillmore. On Tuesday nights, they used to have this thing called Sounds of the City, and Bill Graham would, have all these bands come in, and he had 2 labels. He had one that was distributed by Atlantic and one was distributed by CBS. And so the prize for this Battle of the Bands was a record deal, and they had won a record deal. The producer had told them, well, your drummer and guitar player, I'm giving them 6 months, whatever he said, but they got to come up to speed before I let you record, right? So one night at this club, we were playing in Oakland there on Broadway with the Reality Sandwich Band. 2 horn players came in, and they had come in to sit in and stuff, But this one particular night, they came in and they said, "Are you interested in coming to check us out? We are going to make a drummer change, possibly. You want to come and see it? Come and check it out." And so they were playing at the Keystone Corner in San Francisco, up in North Beach, right? I couldn't believe it, man. I went to check them out. I just couldn't believe it.
You hadn't really heard of them.
I had not heard of them. I hadn't heard them or anything, right? And they were playing original music with really obscure cover songs that nobody in their fucking mind would know, right? Unless you knew music, right? And doing it their kind of their own way. And they're like 19 years old, real young guys.
And you also 21?
I was 23.
23.
I had just gotten out of the military, so they already had like a whole sound and a like a charismatic sort of a thing happening already, man. There was something going on there, and they were just getting started, right? But there was something happening that it was palpable, I met the leader of the band. I mean, first night I heard, I knew I was going to be in it. It was just something that says, man, there was no thought of not being in it. I don't know, it just hit me that hard, right? So I met Emilio, who's the leader. He came and sat in at the club there, invited me to come and play with the band. And he told the guys, this is the guy that's going to be playing with us. Because they said, well, we want to check out some other guys. And he said, no, this is it. This is the guy right here. And so, I started in July 23rd, 1970.
Do you remember what you were thinking when you went in terms of how you wanted to shape it or influence it or bring any of your own thing to it?
I mean, do you think that when you're 23 years old? I mean, you know what I mean? I mean, do you think about the impact you may have on something? I mean, I don't think so.
You just went in and did your thing.
Just went and played the way that I played, and it really just kind of worked with where everything was going with the band, I think in September we started recording, and it was out in November. Not like today where you record something for 3 fucking years and maybe it's done.
And then maybe it comes out.
Yeah, the big maybe is right. I mean, we're doing a recording project now that's like 2.5 years long. But good Lord.
And that was join the band, record, put it out.
Like everybody did. Yeah, that's what was happening. It was all quick turnaround stuff, and music was more instinct.
And less time to think about it.
Yeah. We were growing, we were kind of figuring out ourselves. We didn't have anybody teaching us what to do, we would have and then we started playing 2 nights a week at that club where I met the guys. Mm-hmm. We'd go in there 2 nights a week, no one would come. We were in there playing, and pretty soon the place had a line around the block.
Mm-hmm.
People wanted to see us play. We were making a buzz, right?
Mm-hmm.
But we were kind of making it up as we went along. We would after the gigs, we would go hang out all night, and we would listen to the radio, the FM radio, which was really great here. Tom Donahue and Dusty Street were the DJs on KSAN. So when FM radio was really happening, right?
Mm-hmm.
We'd sit there and smoke weed all night, and then listen to the radio and talk about how we wanted the band to be.
Yeah, that sounds like an extremely important thing to have listened to all that music together, right?
Yeah, that's what we would do. And then it just influenced what we did. We rehearsed every day. Tower was an everyday thing, hardworking. Still is that way. We do 150, sometimes 175. We've even done 200 dates a year, and that's around the world, always doing something, The difference is now that everybody lives in different places that we don't rehearse every day. But for years, there was a rehearsal every day at 1 o'clock at Studio Instrument Reynolds in San Francisco. We did that for a long, long time. We had our own place, too, at one point.
Like a job.
Pretty much. And when we weren't rehearsing, we were doing a gig, or there was some little recording that we were doing, or we were over there hanging out with all the bands, and it was like everybody was there. All the local bands during that period, they all rehearsed there, kept their gear there. So it was sort of ground zero for creatively kind of for all the musicians,
You described earlier the melting pot of music, all the influences, and also just culturally in the Bay, there was all this stuff happening. But was Oakland its own thing?
Yeah.
What was different about Oakland? How did Oakland... That was the funky side.
Yeah. And all the psychedelic music and everything was happening in San Francisco with Bill, Bill's shows and all that stuff, right? But then over here, it was like some great jazz musicians. There was, all the funk and blues and all that stuff, And it seemed like Oakland was the place where a lot of those guys were, where they lived,
Was it more diverse?
Yeah.
Or more mixed?
Well, the Bay Area is that way. I mean, the music scene always has been that way, So whatever things were happening, whether social pressures there were in the rest of society, it seemed like it didn't affect the musicians here, because it was like musicians of every color and background or whatever playing together in houses together, eating together, and making music together. It seemed what it was like here. For me, anyway, my upbringing here,
And you grew up in the East Bay?
Not far from here, in Pleasanton, right 6 miles down the road. Born in Oakland and then lived over there.
When you described what you were into, and it was a melting pot, and you'd taken all these elements, and then the military, it doesn't entirely explain how you came out playing so funky so early. Why was that your disposition?
Well, because in those, at that period, how you became credible as a musician was to be a jazz musician.
Mm-hmm.
That's what everybody was, if you wanted to have any sort of sophistication about your music, you had to be a jazz musician. That's the way that it was, right? Because that was the highest level of everything, right?
Yeah.
Next to classical music, that was the shit, right?
Yeah.
So that's what all my friends were into. That's what I came up in. But then some friends of mine right here in this town took me to see James Brown in San Jose Civic Auditorium. It was like sex. It was like something you have for the first time that changes everything for you. It was like that.
Was Clyde in the band?
No, it was Clayton Filiaw.
Uh-huh.
And so, you're from Clyde country.
Yep, he's my mentor, man.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
I love that guy, man. I have a transcription that I'll give you that I did of something of his after his passing.
That's one of the interesting things. Is my experience with Clyde is Clyde wouldn't know what to do with a transcription of anything that he ever played. He was somebody who naturally did what he did and couldn't really say too much about it. His technique was very self-invented. And you, on the other hand, have a kind of best of both worlds in the sense that you're very much focused on feel and also very much about the technique and the way to practice and play correctly.
Because of my influences, you know, I come up in the more of the classical tradition, the jazz tradition, where you had to know how to read and have technique and, you know, that kind of stuff. And so studying the snare drum was a real big thing for me. It still is, you know.
Yeah.
So I admired guys that could play the snare drum just in the same way that I admired Tony Williams or Elvin Jones. You know, I mean, it's weird, but when I joined Tower, what I did was kind of take all the things that I was learning and kind of synthesize it into make one guy out of it. You know, my favorite drummers of the different styles. And I remember there was a period where there were things about certain drummers that I really liked that I would consciously try to do it and make one drummer out of all these different things.
So what if these three guys were one guy?
Yes.
And so who were some of your...
There was about 7 guys, I think, something like that. But, you know, there's like Greg Rico with Slide of Family Stone. Greg's a really good pal of mine. You know, he lives here in the Bay Area, you know, over in Marin, you know. And so there was him, there was Tony Williams, you know, Elvin Jones, Sonny Payne with the Count Basie Band, all the drummers of James Brown, Purdy, Zigaboo. Then, completely screwed it up. Then I heard Latin music and got really turned on to Latin music. It added another element of things.
And where in your development did you discover Latin music?
Probably early on in Tower. Liking it, but not understanding how to play it until much later. But like everything else I got into was the influence of it, you know, the flavor. I wanted a flavor in there. You know what I mean? So with Tower, everything that I would do with Tower was, I don't know, I was thinking like, let me play this section like Count Basie. Let me play this section like James Brown. I mean, it's weird, you know. Let me play this section like I'm in a symphonic band, you know.
Would that kind of thing change the emphasis that you would place on where the one lays or where the quarter note, how the quarter note feels? Because I feel that in your sections where suddenly just this swing factor will change a little bit in the bridge.
It's weird, yeah.
Or the push and pull of it will shift.
Yeah.
So you really would be like, I'm going to play like a different cat now a little bit.
I kind of think that way. And I just feel differently about different sections, you know. And I always liked the real aggressive kind of front side of the beat kind of drumming. I always just really liked the propulsion of a groove. I admire Gad and other guys who have a real, you know, lock to the floor kind of thing. I admire that. I've never been able to do it successfully because that's just not part of my musical DNA, you know. My thing is more like Latin music where it's kind of push and pull and it's elastic kind of, you know. And even like great jazz performances that have a push and pull in there, you know, like that.
I hear exactly what you're saying. I think in some ways of your playing with Tower as being related to a big band drummer. And
well, it's exactly what it is. That's why I'm just playing 16th notes. But
you're also setting up sections and you're looking at a road map that needs
Exactly. It's really influenced by Sonny Payne. I saw him play with Basie, and when I played a lot of big band music, I tried to play big band just like him, right? I loved it. Jake Hanna with Woody Herman, you know. Those guys, man, to me were like Jesus or something. And, you know, they were so great. And then when I heard the James Brown drummers, I'm going, holy shit, this is great.
Yeah.
But then, you know, seeing horns. So immediately you see horns, you're going to set up horns. You're going to play figures.
Yep.
Right? So the whole concept of ensemble figures, section figures, kind of how to set things up, you know, time played through a figure. I mean, all those conceptual things, right? I do that with Tower.
David Garibaldi setting up the horns and playing the figures. As with any friendship, marriage, or relationship of any kind, a band is a complex series of dynamics. And in the case of Tower of Power, it's a relationship that spans nearly half a century. Here we talk about Dave's musical relationship with bassist Francis Rocco Prestia and what it's like to play with the same cats for so many years.
You know, you talk about how you your disposition, physical, musical, whatever, is to be pushing it to be a little bit, not on top of it, but towards the front of it.
Of course.
It seems like you found a kindred spirit with Rocco in that case.
Rocco's like radar, you know. I remember when I first started playing with Rocco, Rocco has like a pretty amazing ability to play with a drummer, you know. I mean, so I'd make all these recordings at rehearsals when I first started with the band, and I noticed on one recording that when I would play on my ride cymbal, he's playing long notes. And then when I'm playing on my hi-hat, he's playing real short notes. Mm-hmm. Well, I never
talked about that.
Heard that before.
Yeah.
And we never discussed anything. So I said, you know, I told him about it. I said, you know, do you know that when I go to the ride cymbal, you do this? When I play over here, you do this? I said, why do you do that? And he says, real, you know, the wise man that he is, well, it just feels that that's what I should do. It feels like that's what should happen. Mm-hmm. And I'm going, man, this is fucking brilliant.
Yeah.
Because that's the intuitive part, I think, of being a musician that's really important. He knows nothing about what a D7 chord is. He couldn't tell you, you know, anything from a harmonic standpoint of what he plays. He could care less. Mm-hmm. It's all very seat of your pants, intuitive, feel, you know, here's what I'm doing today, and, you know, that sort of stuff.
So it's a kind of funny yin-yang in that sense, because you're very inside of this, of what you're playing. You're very thoughtful about what you're playing, aware of what you're playing.
I am. It helps him in that I guess I'm sort of like a compass in a way, you know. When we would like build songs, he doesn't like anybody to tell him what to play. He doesn't want to be. Doesn't want to feel like, as he calls it, the handcuffs. He doesn't want to feel like that's happening, right? So I had to kind of figure out a way that, well, how we could communicate so he didn't feel like I was telling him what to do. So I would say, like, I think I started when we were doing the Oakland stroke. Mm-hmm. And I would say...
And you brought that feel in initially?
Yeah, that beat, yeah. It was a jam at rehearsal, and then we were missing we needed another song for the Back to Oakland recording, and we didn't have one, and that became it, right? Mm-hmm. So when we were rehearsing it, I said to Rocco, you know, here's what I'm playing. This place where the hi-hat goes, pss, pss, just try not playing there and see what happens. Mm-hmm. So play from this spot to this spot, stop, then start again, right? So that's what he did. I said, well, and he goes, that's pretty cool. And I said, and then when you, in that space, do whatever you want. Mm-hmm. Then eventually, after doing that for years, he told me one time, I know what you're doing. I know what you're doing there, you know.
What is it like to have such a long... I mean, you're now looking at almost a 50-year on and off, but more on than off at this point, relationship, right. Rhythm section relationship with...
Well, even with Emilio, too, the leader, you know, four of us together, you know.
And Doc.
Yeah.
That's a long time, man.
Yeah. But, you know, we sort of went from being like, you know, being in a band together, or you know, bandmates. We became friends. Then we became family. Now we're an organism, mm-hmm. you know. So we kind of evolved to the ultimate, where you feel and you think the same. And so for me, Tower is like home base for me. I'm not interested in playing in any other bands. I could give a shit. Mm-hmm. I love being in the band with those guys. They're like my musical soulmates, mm-hmm. kind of, you know. And I think the thing I enjoy about it the most is that nobody tells anybody what to do. You're there because you play the music well, you enjoy it, you can function well within the structure. You don't mind the structure. You don't mm-hmm. mind playing the same set lists for a few months. You don't mind it. You know, you find a way to be creative in it. I never liked, when I lived in Los Angeles, I wasn't in the band during that period. I didn't like LA because everybody was up everybody's ass about time or ideas, or, you know, it was always something that wasn't right about what you were doing that everybody felt that they were entitled to speak about. And that's not what happens around here, or at least when I was coming up. That's not the way we made music. It was more, up here was more of a family-oriented vibe, little pockets of guys playing together for years. You know, even still now, some guys I know here that I play with, they've been playing together for years and years and years, making music. They do other things with other people, but they have a relationship where they have a vibe and they make music together, right? That's what I like.
And it's acceptance of who you are. You come in with who you are.
Exactly, you know, and like Emilio, you know, he never tells anybody what to do. I think that's one of his...
Throughout all of the people who've come in and out of the band.
Yeah, I mean, if he has to tell you what to do, then you don't belong there.
This is such a big question. You know, I come up against this all the time talking to people. The role of leadership in a band and whether or not a strong leader is that, you know, cats want to work with somebody who knows exactly what they want, or if it makes more sense to just find the right fit and not have to say anything.
Well, I think a great leader doesn't have to tell you what to do. I think a great leader knows how to assemble people, you know, has a concept, you know, a vision, and then acts according to it. You know, the vision that he has dictates how it's going to be put together, who's going to be in it, what, you know.
And the work is done at that point.
Exactly. You know, like Emilio, that was like kind of his gift. He is a natural sort of leader in that way, you know. He's the lead dog, man. I mean, there's no question about it in our band, you know. But he's probably the worst musician in the band in terms of as an instrumentalist. He plays well in the section, but he has the keys to the kingdom. He knows all the chords, he knows all the lyrics, he knows what everybody plays, but he doesn't tell you how to play it.
So how has it been for you in the periods when you weren't playing with Tower to hear how other drummers approached it, or to hear, does it sound like something's wrong, or what did it feel like?
It does. But, you know, I say that respectfully because the two drummers that, you know, use, the two drummers now that play with, sub for me, Russ McKinnon and Herman Matthews, I love those guys. They're really good friends of mine, you know.
Yeah.
And so even though I may disagree conceptually with what they're doing, right, they're fabulous people and fabulous players. But they didn't grow up with Emilio and Rocco, and they weren't there in the beginning, you know, as we were formulating everything. But if I'm not in the band, then I don't have a say in what's going on.
But in your mind, I mean, we were talking about what I went through emotionally to try to start playing in my dad's band, which was to liberate myself from the weight of all of these other cats and find a way that was the most honest.
Yes.
You know, it must be a challenge for these cats to sit in your chair and decide they can't be you, whether or not they're going to try to get as close to that as possible, or...
Hey, believe it or not, the guys in the band that come in that are the most successful are the ones that aren't afraid of that. The ones that make a way for themselves in the structure of what's going on. It's like you kind of have to... You think of it like, well, okay, if I'm going to go play with Count Basie, then... here's how I have to phrase things. You know, here's how I have to articulate these kind of figures or whatever, you know. So there's certain things like stylistically that you have to do. And so I think those guys meet a lot of those kind of requirements. You know, they play a lot of different kinds of music, those guys do, you know. So you can't be just like a one-trick pony, really, even though the band plays a style of music. What makes it that is all the background that goes into what everybody does, you know.
This keeps coming up again and again, and actually, as I heard you say, Zigaboo, Clyde, Bernard Purdy, all of these cats that you mention, I think of as being somehow attached to a kind of a specific localized scene, you know.
True.
In thinking about you...
So am I.
So are you. So are you from here, exactly. Yeah. Except that what you're also saying is, but this scene, what's specific about this scene is we were checking all that out and bringing it here.
I remember when Lenny White came here, and he came here with Chick Corea. Then he met some guys, and then came back to play with Azteca, Pete and Coke Escovedo. When he came here, he was and I say it respectfully because I love him, good friend. But when he came out here at that time, he was kind of a New York sort of snobby jazz dude. And when he saw what was going on here, it really changed his whole viewpoint. Because there was something happening here, you know, not New York, you know, but still it was its own thing, and it was great, and it was valid. There was relevance to it.
Yeah.
You know,
What led you to step away from the band at the
dope.
end?
Bunch of dope heads. As soon as we started making money, people decided that they wanted to degrade themselves, and I tried it too. I was along with everybody else, But then when heroin sort of, appeared, I tried it a couple times, and I had the feeling that, because I knew everybody's parents. We're all young guys. Their families are around all the time, right? And I'm going, what if my dad saw me like this? And I felt shame that I was even experimenting, that I would jeopardize how my father would think about me for this, which I thought was just bullshit, So that changed everything, man. Right there, I decided at that moment, okay, I ain't doing this. And, as it turned out, needles started to show up in guys' lives and all this stuff, and it just became, creativity stopped, friendship stopped, that's for sure. Because that's the first thing that goes when people have a dope relationship. You don't trust each other anymore. Your only commonality is your love of getting loaded. There's no humanity in it anymore. So that's why I left.
Sounds like there was a moment when you realized that this is not going to work.
Yeah, it was 1974, spring of 1974. Up to that point, the best that the band had ever played. There's a record out called Hipper Than Hip. It's a live recording that we did in a recording studio in New York, at Ultrasonic out in Hempstead, right? It was the spring. We played also the Calderon Theater there out on Long Island. We were playing all the places, man, and the band was just like, it was like Sherman's March to the Sea or something. I mean, we were just laying waste to everyone, and even blowing our own minds, discovering things about ourselves musically, it was just, I still have, I get chills right now thinking about it, those moments in that time period, how cool it was. But then, after that tour was over, kind of late spring, we were getting ready to do Urban Renewal. And we started recording. I'm going, man, this is not right,
Didn't feel the same.
It didn't feel the same. And everybody was like, dope was becoming the focus, as opposed to what it was before, which was the music and, that sort of stuff. And even though the songs were really cool, right? The vibe was kind of low life in a way, for me.
Yeah.
And everybody that was hanging around was some sort of gangster wannabe or some kind of bullshit that was really interfering with just living a peaceful life together.
So was it hard to leave the band?
It was difficult. It's like a relationship with somebody that you really love, and okay, this shit's not working out so good.
Yeah.
And then the handwriting's on the wall. I got to go do something. So I left, and then I moved to LA. I was there for 12 years. And even in that period, just, there were very few moments during that period where the music was, to me, as fun and as exciting as being in Tower. I even actually went back for a couple of years. Actually, I went back 2 other times.
Yeah, I didn't know it was that early. I thought of it as more like 79 that you had left. I didn't realize.
No, I left in 74, and then went back not long after that and did Live and in Living Color and a couple of recordings. And then we were trying to get out of a Warner Brothers contract. And so we did 2 recordings at the same time. We did a live recording and a studio recording. So In the Slot and Live and in Living Color were done at the same time. So we would go out and do gigs and do live gigs that had become the recording, and then we would do studio recordings during the week, Then I went back in 79, 80, and by that time the band's reputation as a bunch of dope heads had, become what was totally in their way of any success, And I realized, okay, this looks like the end for me. No more coming back here. And then I was gone for 18 years.
Yeah.
When I went back with them, they had never asked me. I was the enemy.
They never asked you to come back?
They never asked me to come back until 18 years later.
You think you would have gone back sooner if they'd asked sooner?
Maybe. But the thing is that when they did ask me back, circumstances where I had done a recording for Doc, one of the solo recordings, there was no dope. And they were all friendly to me. They were my pals again.
So when you went into that recording session, you weren't sure what you were going to find.
Right.
You didn't know what kind of shape they were going to be in.
Right. And I went in at the request of the guitar player who was in the band at the time, Jeff Tanelaire, who I had met almost when I came back here, moved back from LA. He was one of the first guys I met, and he started using me in his bands. He had a bunch of bands and different stuff, and he was kind of one of those guys that always putting gigs together.
Yeah.
And he would call me and introduce me to a whole bunch of people and kind of gave me a start here. So we became really friendly. I mean, I still think of that time and real fondly of him, for just giving me a chance to get a life going here, again.
Get back in the scene.
Yeah. And then, met Doc and those guys, or worked on
again,
Doc's recording again, right? And saw there was no dope, and I was just blown away, Then I went to see the band at the Fillmore. Herman was playing. And it was okay. I had not heard them in a long, long time. I mean, it was good, but it wasn't my concept of Tower, kind of, what we had built. After that, not long after that, they had gone to Europe. And I got a call from Jeff, the guitar player, Jeff Tamelaire, and Emilio. They called from Europe. And they said, well, Herman's leaving. You want to come back? And this is Emilio. Was on the phone. You want to come back? I don't know. Let's talk.
Yeah.
So he said, well, we have a tour of Japan coming. You want to do that? So sure. So that was going to be, we were going to test the waters to see if we still liked each other. Could get along, right? So I started rehearsing with the band. The tour was moved to a different point in the year, but there was a lot of other gigs, so I just started doing gigs, like usual. You just get in the rotation and start doing the gigs, right? And about 6 months later, I realized we were doing the North Sea Jazz Festival in Europe, right? I realized, well, all of a sudden that night, for whatever reason, everything just clicked. And I would say, okay, I'm back home now. This is good.
You're very active, and it's a physically demanding gig. And you particularly are playing a lot of drums.
Yeah.
Have you felt over the years, you look great, you look young, but you're not the young man that you were when you started, that it's more challenging to play for a set every night? And
not really.
What do you attribute that to?
I mean, it's what it is. There are certain parts of my playing that my playing has really changed over the years. It changes all the time, I don't know what it's going to be like when I go back this time.
Yeah.
I'm going to do my best. I wasn't sure what it was going to be like when I went back last time after the hip surgeries, because I was gone from January to November, just like this time, January to November. But at the same time, I was working on things, and, I kind of have a program that I'm doing, that I'm here, so let's work on some stuff.
Yeah.
But still, people say, whoa, you're 70 years old. I mean, how are you supposed to think when you're 70? What are you supposed to feel like?
Yeah.
Are you supposed to be, like, drooling, sitting on the edge of the bed staring at the floor? I mean, what are you supposed to be doing?
Yeah.
I'm motivated to live, and I enjoy my life. I enjoy my friends. I really enjoy what I do. I feel blessed. Even before the accident, I was blessed to be able to do this for as long as we've been doing it. And it's still at a level that is pretty amazing when we go out to perform. I mean, I think, even at Yoshi, before the accident, the gigs leading up to that day, those were some of the best gigs that I've ever done on Tower. I mean, seriously.
You remember thinking that?
Oh, absolutely.
This is some of the best gigs we've ever done.
Absolutely so. And the guys, they're going, oh, this is seriously cool.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a bunch of guys who are really fun to be around, because everybody, we don't use the A word, age. We don't think like that.
Yeah.
Everybody has fabulous energy. It's a self-policing deal. Somebody's not playing good or trying to phone something in.
Well, that speaks to the idea of leadership again, which is when leadership is in place properly, nobody has to say anything because it's so obvious what is expected and what is required.
Well, and also that isn't just one person.
Yes.
It's a pervasive sort of, it's like an encompassing way that everybody thinks. Everybody has that within them. Everybody tries every night to play as good as they possibly can.
Yeah.
There's no phoning stuff in,
So much of the stuff is worked out. How do you find a way to make it fresh every time you play stuff that,
Well, periodically I'll rebuild a song. And periodically I'll just not play it so in such an orchestrated way. I can't change it too much because then it changes the character of the song, right? But certain stuff, I change it just to make it fun and keep the challenge there.
Yep.
So that you kind of have to go, can I do this?
Yeah.
There's always that factor in it. Can I do this?
Mm-hmm. Does some of that happen with equipment? The way you set up? Do you change your setup sometimes to keep it interesting?
No, because I want to have everything in the same place all the time, so I know where I'm hitting.
Yeah.
Let the challenge be, more of a musical one as opposed to like the,
something in physical
the
space.
Physical space, kind of,
Yeah.
So I try to, if I have a setup that works, I'll tweak it a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
Like I tell, the guy that takes care of my drums, it's about angles, so sometimes I'll change the angle a little bit.
There's an enormous economy of your motion.
There's the reason. That's how I was taught. I was taught to think about economy of movement, So it's like in martial arts where you generate a maximum amount of force in a short distance, right? And so you use that distance, you understand the force that you can generate, right? And you do that by studying, right? And getting in touch with mechanically what's going on, right? And you can go at a high level for a very, very long time, unless something debilitating happens to you, But you're preserving, your ability, you're sort of preserving it. You're learning how to maximize it so that it lasts for a long time. If you play in an out-of-control way, you're going to hurt yourself. You're going to wear out. You see it.
Yes.
Right? To me, like, working on technique is like you're like a finished carpenter. You're working on a project that you're always looking for nicer touches, right? Nicer improvements, right? Things that look better.
Aesthetic.
Yes. You're always looking for those that's how I was taught. You're always looking for those things. And then kind of like my group of guys who I really enjoy, who are really friendly with, that's how they think. And this is not just on the drums, but other instruments, right? They're always working on becoming more efficient, which I think as you get older, efficiency becomes the number one thing that you have to develop. Because everybody's skills diminish. It happens, right? That's the nature of life, is flower and then decay, right?
David Garibaldi on the nature of life. Drummers, man, they are a different breed. You may know this already, so forgive me for stating the obvious, but you know what drummers call the stool they sit on when they play? The throne. The drum throne. Some people might come to the conclusion that drummers have some kind of ego trip, power complex thing happening, but I tend to think of it in these terms. Drummers are inside the music and also above it, or beyond it in some way as well. Like goalies, they see the whole game, they set the pace, they decide how it's going to feel. So it should be no surprise that in the context of talking about his technique, David Garibaldi would naturally extrapolate into a deeper meaning, the nature of life itself. In the 1990s, Garibaldi began to explore Afro-Caribbean music in earnest, playing with percussion masters Mike Spiro and Jesus Diaz. To his surprise, as one story has it, he came to discover that his early playing in Tower of Power influenced the Cuban music that he was now studying, like the music of Los Van Van. Dave tells a story about meeting their percussionist Changuito and feeling like they were musical brothers. Here in our final segment, we talk about that cycle of influence and discovery, and end with Dave Garibaldi's family recipe for happiness and longevity.
You said earlier that it's not time to assess what your influence has been, but there are a few trails that you left behind and that seem to be like a conversation, and one of them seems to me the relationship with Cuban music and Afro-Caribbean music. You talk about how you started to check it out and maybe integrate a little bit of it into the band the first time around. I mean, I've heard that Changuito was checking you out
He was in my house. He was in my living room. I used to have, before I got married, I had my drums in my living room. And Rebecca Moleon brought him over to the house to meet me.
When was this?
Oh, I don't know. Quite a few years ago now, in the 90s.
And you were aware of Los Van Van, and you were...
Of course. Because I was playing with guys around here. You know, we had a percussion group that was like a folkloric, you know...
With Spyro and
Jesus, you know. And so Changuito was like...
The guy.
Revered.
Yes.
Right? And so he came over. And when I saw him play in my living room, and this is like, are you from Oakland or something? You know, I mean, the way that he played was really interesting. Ignacio Baroa told me this, that when Los Van Van went to Europe for the first time, they came back with tapes of Cold Blood and Tower of Power, and that changed everything. Because when I saw Changuito play in my living room, it was like a drummer from here that could, you know, songified his playing, and it was all clave based and everything, but it was constructed like somebody from here. And I'm going, man, this is really deep. I told Ignacio about that, and he says, well, here's why.
They were listening to you.
Yeah.
But then you were, in turn, and the cats here were listening to them.
Yes. But in sort of a lame way, because we weren't allowed to go there. So you had to sneak there, right, if you wanted to go.
Yes.
Right? Whereas I'd go to Europe, and I'd see that, like, there's this Dutch drummer who was a pal of mine I really like, Lucas van Merwijk, right? He was playing, understood clave and everything, and played the Latin stuff like a Cuban, because he had been going there to study, because their government would pay for them to go study.
Yes.
And here, we can't because we have politics preventing it.
But have you been down? Have you gone?
I have not.
You have not gone down?
I have not gone.
Fortunately, you live in this rich cultural area where it's available here.
I mean, if I want to go see Cubans, I'll go to Jesus' house.
Yeah.
Those guys there in Europe, you know, they could go to school there. They could, you know, have a cultural exchange, you know.
Yeah.
Where here, it was like, you're not being patriotic if you're having cultural, you know, exchanges.
Right.
You know, like, come on, please.
How did the Cuban thing and the Afro-Caribbean thing influence your playing, and what got you so interested in it? What was it about it that got you so excited?
Playing with Michael and Jesus, because to me those are some of the deepest guys I know. Yeah. And they taught me everything about it. And when I first moved back to the Bay Area, I was looking for somebody to study with. I wanted to know about that music. And there were a couple people that I got turned on to, and it just wasn't making a connection. It wasn't somebody who could really teach me what was going on. Yeah. Right? And somebody said, well, do you know Michael Spyro? Never heard of him. Yeah. So I called him up and went to his house in San Francisco, where he was living up on Potrero Hill, and we started lessons. And it almost immediately turned into a group. Yeah. And we started, you know, I'd bring him on clinics with me and that kind of stuff. Yeah. And then we wanted to expand, and he says, well, I know this guy named Jesus Diaz. Yeah. Come and see, we're going to be playing, it was at the Caribe Dance Hall in Oakland, downtown Oakland, and our band's going to be playing over there. Come and check it out. And so I went over to the gig, and I stood on the edge of the stage, and I was watching Jesus, and he was got really paranoid because I was watching him. And he's asking Michael, what's the matter with this guy? You're like really watching. Yeah. What's the matter with this guy? And so, you know, Michael explained to him who I was and blah, blah, blah. And then we got together and played, and it was like magic. Yeah. You know? And then I got the deal to do these, videos, drum videos, you know? And so they were all into it. Sandy Feldstein, who was the executive producer, I told him, he's the one that signed me to the videos, do the videos, and said, I got this percussion group, I want to do this, and blah, blah, blah. So he let me do whatever I wanted to do. Yeah. So that was kind of our, our target, was being ready for that. Mm-hmm. So we rehearsed for 2 years before we did it.
Gave you a goal to work towards.
Yeah. And then we were doing gigs and kind of build the concept, and, we're doing clinics and all kinds of stuff, Mm-hmm. And it was really exciting stuff, man. I learned so much. And it just helped understand about clave and, how that works in music, and how clave is present in all North American music, Western music because of the influence of African musicians, and that concept,
Yes.
It's such a deep tradition, and so, there's all the Brazilian music. There's, every place you go where Africans were, there's a trail of cool music and cultural things that are there that influence what's going on,
Did you then bring some of that new information with you back into Tower when you...
Oh, yeah, it goes wherever I go, I don't consciously say, well, here's what I learned in this. And I learned long ago, don't tell anybody what you're doing. Just do it, Years ago, I was really excited I was learning how to play odd times, but I was playing them in 4/4, over the 4/4, right? And so I learned this thing to play, I made up this thing in 7 that I used to play on the intro of one of our songs, and I never told anybody, but it was so cool, the way that it all, revolved, and then after 8 bars, I would move into the groove, So finally one day, I told the guys in the band what I was doing. One of the guys says, "Not in our music." So they got all bent out of shape, and I realized, well, okay, from that point,
don't tell. Don't ever tell.
Don't say what you're doing. Just do it.
How does that relate to the way you teach and present the material to students of music and
Well, it's
drum
changed
students?
a lot. I used to be a lot more hardcore and that kind of stuff, But what I discovered was that my best teachers were the ones that didn't teach me anything, in a sense, specifically. They would, but then they would never tell me what to do with it afterward. They would lead me somewhere. And to me, one of the greatest examples of that was Sandy Feldstein when I did my first book. And I had gone to see him because I didn't like what other publishers were saying about it and what they would do, and I wasn't happy with what I was hearing. So he was somebody who had written books and was known in the publishing world, right, as somebody really cool. So I called up Alfred Publishing when I lived in L.A. I'd like to meet with Sandy Feldstein. Sure. I was shocked, Okay, this guy is giving me an audience, which was pretty cool, right? So I brought my manuscript in there, and it was, everything I'd thought about drums. I still have it. So everything that I thought about drums would be a great thing to be in a book.
Yes.
And so he was very gracious. We talked about it, and he took it home. And he was a former college professor at Potsdam University, percussion instructor, right? So he took it home, and he graded it like a college paper, this manuscript, right? Red lines and put it out on his dining room table, he said, and all this stuff, right? We met again, and he said, "This is really great. I really like it. But you don't have a subject." What? You don't have a subject. This is drums, right? He says, "No, you don't have a subject. You have to focus on something that you want to share, right? And it has to be a specific thing, and it's going to be the subject of the book, and then you save the rest for other books." Something I'd never thought of. So he says, "Go home and figure it out and come back." So it took me 2 weeks to figure out how to do this. What was it going to be? And then it just dawned on me one day in my practice room, I love this groove kind of idea. That's kind of what excites me about drumming. It's like hi-hat, snare drum, and bass drum. So there's my subject. That's kind of what I focus on anyway.
Yep.
So I went back to him, met with him again, and I said, hi-hat, snare drum, and bass drum. And he said, "You're right." Because he knew, but he wasn't telling me what to do. He wanted me to find out. So everything I did with him was all about discovery. He would lead me, kind of point me in a path, right? He would never say anything specific about what to do. But what he said always led me to the thing he was thinking about, which would help me. Incredible lesson. And I looked at this, I saw what he was doing, I realized what he was doing, and how great it was, and how that's how it's supposed to be. When you're really mentoring someone, you're not telling them what to do. You're kind of guiding them, helping them to figure out what it is that they're about, right? And then help that person to shape, right? Help that person to become what they want to be, I learned also that I
Yes.
was reading this book by this guy named Stephen Chandler. It's called Fearless. Great book. And this guy's a motivational kind of a guy and life coach sort of a guy. It's a cool book. And in there he talks about if you want to be fearless, act in a fearless way, then you have to act. And then the feelings will follow. Right? You have to act first. You don't wait for yourself to be, free from fear, and then all of a sudden cool stuff will happen. You have to act no matter how you feel. You could have you shitting your pants, but you have to act in a fearless way, right? And so when people come to see him, the first thing he asks them, and this is something that I had been asking students all along, didn't realize how important it was what do you want to create? What do you want to do? Why are you here? Why are you come to see me? And then it puts it right, the responsibility puts it right where it belongs, and that is in the person's lap who wants the help, who wants the direction. Because if you have to ask them, right, and they're not presenting to you what they want to do, it's because they haven't really thought about it. They're thinking that you're going to give them this thing that they need. The thing you're going to give them is to teach them to think for themselves and to come back with some ideas about what they want to do. It's amazing the results that you get. So, my teachers, my college music teacher, who just came to visit me here the other day, walked up him and his wife, they came to visit just to see if I was okay, because they had heard about the accident and stuff, right? And this is the guy that taught me that, repetition is the mother of learning and all these things. And he was just so great in the way that he taught me things, So anyway.
Repetition is the mother of learning.
People talk about muscle memory.
Yes.
Right? But I think you have to have memory first. I think you have to practice something so that you understand what each voice is doing, what each limb is doing, right? And then you have to revisit that until it becomes natural to you, right? Until you don't have to think about it. Practice until you can't make a mistake, right? And so with me, when I practice things in a pretty ad nauseum, kind of like over and over and over and over. And then I'll take a break and then come back again. I always revisit stuff all the time, right? There's a really cool book called The Talent Code, which talks about, the 10,000 hours and all this other stuff, right? But one thing that's in the book is how you get to that sweet spot in your learning and to slow everything down, right? So that you introduce like the ultimate suck factor into what you're doing, right? And so that you slow everything down and then you focus on that area that you're having all this difficulty with. And the slowing down allows you to see mechanically what's wrong. And that's what you work on.
And at the same time, I hear you say you always kind of are trying to find a moment in your set or in your performance where you actually still have to ask yourself, am I going to pull this off?
Sure, all the time.
Because it seems to me that without that, it's very hard to sort of be present and in it.
Well, it keeps you reaching.
Yes.
It's like you want to be able to reach for things.
Yes.
Because that's where you pull out of yourself that thing that's really you, that, that allows you to excel.
Yes.
Right? And it's different for everyone, right? But it's that thing that creates the magic, sort of, if you want to call it that, for lack of a better word, that moment where you just go for it.
Yeah.
And you don't know what it's going to be.
Yes. Do you surprise yourself sometimes?
Yeah, that happens. But, I just kind of have a habit of trying my best and accept what comes of it. Sometimes it's not good. So I think that part of this, being your best, or at least trying to be your best, is accepting when you don't. I never used to do that. I used to be up my ass about everything, And when I learned to accept things so that there was a flow going on all the time, right? I was happier.
Yeah. Whatever happens, if you can accept it and react from that place.
Yeah. Like my mother, I use my mother as a great example of that. When she was later in her life, had physical difficulties and things, probably this is the way that she always was, and I just didn't realize it until later, watching her, is that when she was faced with something, she would always rearrange her thinking to accept it and keep moving forward. And she stayed peaceful and happy.
Well, I see you doing the same thing. I mean, you're talking about a very powerful existential crisis that happened to you, and you're in the shed moving forward.
I'm trying to, I'm just working on that. My mother had this recipe for, when she turned 95, I was all excited, talking to her. I said, Mom, you're going to be 95 years old. It's just so cool. And she says, there's a reason for it, and here it is. I'm going to tell you why I'm 95. She says, I laugh a lot, which she did. She had a great sense of humor. She had a deep faith in God. Her faith was important to her, right? And one of the big ones, she let go of everything that would keep her from being happy. She forgave people. She let go of bad situations. She didn't carry it forward. She closed the book on stuff. Let it go. Let things go, right? Nutrition. She was into nutrition. I remember when I was a kid, before anybody was, nobody even talked about it, right? And she didn't smoke. That was another one.
All the right stuff that years later people say this is what you need to do.
Exactly.
She was on it.
She was doing it. That's how she lived. And by example, that's what, she wasn't bullshitting. This is how
you do it.
She lived. And you could see it. And every time she was faced with a challenge, she'd rearrange her thinking and move. And she just kept going that way all the way till the end. You could see it.
I have a feeling you're going to do something similar.
I'm going to try. Yeah. I'm going to do my best, absolutely.
David Garibaldi, thank you so much.
Man, my pleasure.
It's been we could do it all day.
We could keep going, yes.
There it was, David Garibaldi. Laugh a lot, have faith, let go of whatever keeps you from happiness, and also eat healthy. If you enjoyed this one, hit third-story.com and dig into the archive. I'll be back next week with another great conversation. Until then, I'll talk to you soon.